Hi, this is Todd from Sniping Rhino Ranch. We're a few days after Memorial Days, and so today's video for stuff on Saturday, I figured I would talk about the loss of the crew of aircraft 431, Blackhawk helicopter loss on November 7th, 2003. Before we get into it, if you're not a subscriber, hit the subscribe button and all that good stuff. But that being said, let's talk about the crew of 431. Okay, so why am I talking about aircraft 431? Well, a couple reasons. One, we just had Memorial Day, and that's always a time of reflection. I've stopped counting at around 100, or at 100, of people I knew who were killed in combat or training accidents and stuff in the military. But, so you lose a lot of friends, but the loss of aircraft 431 probably hit me harder than any other loss I experienced of, friends and comrades in arms. Mostly because, Captain Ben Smith was one of the pilots on the aircraft, and me and him were roommates. We lived in this bunker, probably about 20 feet underground, and then with a bunch of concrete above us in Kiara West, we called it Q West, in Iraq. It's, I don't know, a little south of Mosul, Iraq. But we lived underground. We're roommates. And, if you've been in the Army, he was an officer, I was an enlisted guy. But there is this relationship that officers and enlisted counterparts have with each other, whether that be a battalion or higher commander and their sergeant major, a first sergeant and a company commander, or staff. In that case, it was for us. I was his battle NCO in the Tactical Operations Center, and he was the battle captain. And so we pretty much spent, every day with each other. And then when we were done, we'd go back to our room in the bunker, and we would just talk. And there's supposed to be that separation, and there is among professionals, but there's this friendship that goes well beyond an officer enlisted relationship. And so we shared each other's hopes and dreams, and so the day he died was pretty traumatic. In fact, it kind of led me on a kind of a spiral course of not efficiently dealing with my PTSD that led to, I guess, me becoming a Christian 5 years later on the anniversary of his death. And so aircraft 431 was a Blackhawk helicopter. I was with 5 of the 101 Aviation in the 101st Airborne Division in Iraq. And, we were a Blackhawk unit. And so that morning, there was a mission that our unit had to send 2 helicopters up to Mosul, Iraq, to pick up a general from the JAG Corps and his entourage up in Mosul, Iraq, and then fly him down to Tikrit, Iraq, where the 4th ID was. And so, as a staff officer, you don't get to fly that much, so he was pretty excited about flying that day. He was getting ready to go for his pilot in command check ride, and so he actually that morning asked to have the crew assignments changed so that he could fly in aircraft 431 and get some practice of as pilot in command, get some of that training in to help prepare him for his pilot in command training. So originally he was supposed to fly the other aircraft that had the general with them. So they switched out. He switched out with a female lieutenant who, she's a whole nother story. I mean, she came to us while we were in Iraq, and man, she had some crazy things happen that almost killed her a bunch of times, and she stuck with it. It was a very impressive display of courage on her part throughout the rest of that tour. But anyway, switched with her and ended up in Aircraft 431. The other pilot was Chief Warrant Officer Karen Kennedy. Dude was a big man. He was tall, from the New England area, and I always drank coffee black. I always like, hey, real men drink coffee black, and he would come in and make this, what he called this foo-foo coffee, adding sugar and creamer and stuff to it, and then he'd always make fun of me, like, foo-foo coffee. And just an amazing individual. His family's pretty amazing too. Really strong wife, and really a display of fortitude she had after he was killed. And then the two crew chiefs were Staff Sergeant Paul Neff and Specialist Rose. He was later, after his death, posthumously promoted to sergeant, if I remember correctly. I mean, we were talking 2003. And so they flew up to Missoula, and two members of the Army JAG Corps, the Sergeant Major, Gilmore, I believe his name was, he was Sergeant Major of the entire JAG Corps, got on board along with the Chief Warrant Officer, JAG Corps, Chief Warrant Officer 5, I think it's Starworth or something like that, and I apologize. She was a senior warrant officer for the JAG Corps, as well as a senior female warrant officer in the Army. There's actually a display in the Smithsonian with one of her uniforms. But those two individuals from the JAG Corps got on board, and they flew down to Tikrit. You know, before they took off, you know, Captain Smith was interesting in this. He never carried ammo, ever. I used to mess with him all the time. I'm like, what are you going to do when the shooting starts? Because, you know, I was a magnet for stupid stuff. And he's like, well, you'll be around. If we ever need, you know, if I ever need to shoot, we're in trouble. So he never carried ammo. So before he went on the aircraft, he's like, hey, give me a magazine. Because I usually had a pistol, a rifle, and a saw when I went out. And I was like, what? And I was like, you don't carry ammo. What do you mean, do you want some ammo? It's like, I'm feeling like a gunfighter today. He's like, come on, give me a magazine. So I gave him a 9mm magazine for his M9. You know, he put it in his pistol, and it's like, yeah, I feel like a gunfighter today. And I was like, you probably jinxed yourself. And man, I have absolutely struggled with guilt for this for years. And he had this PlayStation. I was like, hey, if you die, can I have your PlayStation? And, you know, he's like, yeah. And, you know, for the record, I didn't take his PlayStation. But, you know, what a terrible thing to say. And then when he took off, he made some minor mistake or something, you know, on the radio. And I jokingly told him, you know, like, hey, make sure you do a little better for the general, whatever. And, you know, I just kicked myself in the butt for, you know, those being the last two conversations I had with him. But anyway, so they were on their way to Tikrit, and they went up over some wires. They had to fly over and then come back down. First lead aircraft went over, and they came over, and it may have been reversed. I can't remember. But aircraft 431 was hit with a SA-14 surface-to-air missile. You know, there was, you know, hadn't really been used in Iraq before, and we thought maybe it was a rocket-propelled grenade for a while, but hit the aircraft, and they went down with the loss of everybody on board. I was, you know, I worked in the talk at night at a tactical operations center at night, and then during the day I was would do convoys. Didn't have any convoys that day, but I was also the commander of the Quick Reaction Force because, you know, I was Ranger qualified in an aviation unit, and so, you know, former infantry, so they had me doing that. So we get the call that we have an aircraft down, and we, you know, I throw my stuff on. We end up, it was the battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Laura Richardson at the time, who's, I think, a 3 or 4 star general now, just getting ready to, or just took command of Southern Command. And we jumped on an aircraft, on the command and control aircraft, and flew down there. And I remember just praying, please let Captain Smith be alive. And I felt terrible because I knew everybody on board. And I felt guilty for it, but I wanted to be selfish. I wanted to think, or, you know, I wanted him to be alive. And we get the battalion commander, Colonel Richardson, she writes something on a piece of paper and hands it to me, and it's like 4 killed in action, 2 wounded in action. And I was just like, please let him be one of the 2 wounded in action. Unfortunately, there wasn't 2 wounded in action. The sister ship had circled around, and 2 crew chiefs had gotten out and walked over to the aircraft, and the infantry guys who had been overwatching this area and came down had saw those 2 and thought they were part of the crew, and so said there was 2 WIA. But, you know, once we get down there, the entire crew was lost. And I mean, it's devastating. I mean, anybody who's gone through it knows, but when you're that close to someone, you spend every day you know, working together and living together, sharing each other's hopes and dreams. I remember he wanted to get his wife pregnant, who was up in Missoula with, I believe, 9th of the 101. I wanted to get her pregnant so she could get out of country, and, you know, of course that didn't happen, and, you know, she ended up a widow. But, you know, so we have to identify all the bodies, and I remember when I first saw Captain Smith's body, I was like, this isn't him. I mean, it, like, didn't look like him. And helicopter crashes can be pretty tough on human remains, but the crew was in pretty decent shape. Their bodies were. And then suddenly it hit me as he wasn't smiling. And I'd never seen him not with a grin on his face. And it was so different seeing him without a grin on his face, I didn't recognize him. And so, you know, we identified the bodies. We went to attack the little company command center that, or platoon command center of a unit we had that was supporting 4th ID down there in Tikrit. And I remember one of the female crew chiefs came up, and they told her that they had lost the crew, and she just started bawling. It's like he never got to see his baby, because Scott Rose had his wife had a child before, or while he was deployed. And, you know, in the beginning there wasn't mid-tour leaves or anything like that. Towards the end they had a select few, but you know, he didn't get it. And you know, this female crew chief realized that he had never got to hold his daughter. I think it was a girl, and if it's not, I apologize to the family. But, you know, there's no pictures of him with his kid. You know, not only does his kid never know anything about her father, there's no pictures of them together. And it was just kind of really heartbreaking. And then later that night, they have what's called angel flights, where they put the remains on an aircraft to start them on their journey home. And you know, I end up having to carry the JAG Corps, the 2 members of the JAG Corps, the senior warrant officer and the sergeant major of the JAG Corps. I carried their remains onto the helicopter, and then Captain Smith. And it was a weird experience. There's no real ceremony in it. It was pitch black, no lights. It's at night. in a combat zone, so there's no lights, and you know, 4 people, you know, one on either handle of the stretcher carries the remains, and the crew chief opens the door. You put it in, and they slam the door, and that's it. There's no patriotism. There's no pomp or ceremony. I mean, there's respect to it, you know, because you'd put them on, you'd march back, and the crew chief would just slam the door shut until the next person came up. But it was just experience, you know, I never wanted to do again. So we flew back to Key West, and man, that was rough. I was exhausted because I'd been up. My soldiers, my section, and fellow leaders were absolutely amazing. They covered my shift for me, so I could get some sleep because I was just drained. And you know, it was just tough. Everybody was having a tough time, and but I needed them to cover that for me so I could get my strength up, so I could be strong for my soldiers. And I remember the next day, I walked in my room, and the officers of the unit had done their best to try to do it while I was gone, but they had to go inventory all the stuff. I'm just walking into the room, and his stuff's torn down, and it's in duffel bags and stuff. And you know, they were just so amazing trying to get this when I wasn't there, and I ended up coming, and I just turned around and walked away. I couldn't say anything. I didn't want to see them. And then I came back a little later. It was this big, I didn't realize the room was that big until the stuff was gone, and it was just my stuff in it. And then, you know, we had the memorial service on November 11th, which was Memorial Day, which I thought was pretty fitting, or excuse me, Veterans Day, which I thought was fitting. And we just remembered, you know, our 4 fellow unit members who passed on, because, I mean, death is final, and it was an emotional experience. And yeah, and that's pretty much what I remember about Aircraft 431, and you know, the 4 good men and of the crew, and you know, the good man, the good woman from the JAG Corps who lost their life on November 7th, 2003, and so I thought about it because, you know, all weekend you see the stuff people post on Facebook, and you see, you know, the different memorials to Aircraft 431 and the crew of 431, and so I figured I'd just talk about it because I really never have. So anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed this video, because I didn't, but I appreciate you listening and watching if you've gone this far. And I guess this is Todd from Sniping Rhino Ranch saying have a great day.